So welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're here. This is a webinar called Empowering and Engaging Your Volunteers on the World's #1 CRM. If that is not the webinar you signed up for today, you are in the wrong place. But hopefully everyone is here to see this lovely webinar we're putting on between Advanced Communities and Salesforce, our lovely partner. So Kevin, would you mind maybe popping to the next slide for me? Thank you. So folks, my name is Rebekah Hunter. I'm the VP of Alliances at Advanced Communities, and that really means that I look after the relationship between Advanced Communities and Salesforce, as well as other partners in the ecosystem. And today I am joined by Kevin Zeigler, who is the Specialist Solution Engineer at Salesforce, and might I add, was awarded SE of the Year at Salesforce very recently. And I keep giving him guff about this, but I think he should speak a little bit more about that. Anyway, Kevin, would you like to say a few words and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much, Rebekah. Nice to meet everybody out there, no matter what time zone you're in. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. My name is Kevin Zeigler. I am on a small but mighty specialist team in our nonprofit practice here at Salesforce. And my specialty is all things programs. And one of the big things that often falls under that is volunteers. And I have the privilege every day of coming to work and talking to many different customers about their programs and how can we leverage Salesforce to better manage our programs. And again, one of those things often comes to volunteers. And so I love being able to talk through use cases and really helping customers design sort of an end-to-end experience for volunteers or program participants and really get the most out of their investment in Salesforce.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Kevin. Do you want to hop to the next slide? All right, folks. So today, our agenda. First, we're going to go through why volunteer management on Salesforce is the best solution. And Kevin is going to walk us through those steps. So he's going to talk a little bit about Salesforce Nonprofit Cloud and how volunteer management can be held on Salesforce, as well as with other apps like Advanced Communities. We're then going to jump into a success story between Advanced Communities and one of our customers called Bookmark. And then from there, we will move into a live demo of the MemberSmart solution, which is built natively on top of Salesforce. And after that, we will host a Q&A. So from here, I'd like to pass it over to Kevin to go ahead and get started and teach us all about volunteer management on the Salesforce platform. Kevin, take it away.
All right. Beautiful. So this is a volunteer. Let's say it's a volunteer for your organization. And before we really dive into sort of the meat of what I want to kind of get across in the webinar, I want to ask you a question. So if you look around and maybe even look down at your own feet, right? Why is it that we as human beings gravitate towards premium products when a clear, cheaper alternative exists, right? So just take a look at some of these items, right? And you may have some of these in your house. You may even be wearing some of these, right? A $90 backpack, $250 shoes, $300 fake plant from Pottery Barn, right? And so you could certainly walk the same in a $20 pair of shoes, right? And put your stuff in a $10 backpack. And I would doubt anyone that walks into your house would notice that your fake plant is more or less fake just because it was a fifth of the price. But the question that you really got to ask yourself is why? Why do people gravitate towards premium items, right? And why do they pay a premium for these things, right? And I would argue that people don't actually buy products, right? They buy better versions of themselves or the experience of dealing with that particular brand. And you gravitate towards these brands because of that experience. And so whether or not you knew it, your emotions probably drove you to pay a premium for these things. A recent Harvard study showed that 95% of all of our purchasing decisions are made on emotion alone, right? And then we use our logic in our heads to actually justify that, right? So whether you get exceptional service from a company you like and a widget broke and you got really good service from that, or you just like the way you feel when you slip on the $250 pair of shoes, what you're actually chasing is an experience. So then the next question when we start thinking about volunteering is how does this show up in the world of volunteering? And so whenever I talk to customers about their volunteer programs, I always encourage them to look at it through a specific lens, right? How can we take the interaction with a volunteer and make that, design that in a way that brings somebody closer to your organization's mission, right? And so if you're thinking about volunteer management and scheduling shifts as the only aspect of your volunteer program, you might actually be missing the bigger point here, right? If your goal as an organization is to get more engaged and qualified volunteers, just being able to schedule more shifts in a volunteer management system or run better reports, that alone is probably not going to get you there. What you're really after is a connected and personalized experience for every volunteer. So whether we're talking about donors or volunteers or somebody calling into a call center, for example, every interaction is an opportunity for you to bring somebody closer to your mission. And so in volunteers, I like to talk about the 4 C's of volunteer engagement, right? Cultivation, clarity, culture, and connection, right? And how do we take each of those and apply them to each step a volunteer might go through in a journey to bring them closer to our mission? So if we take a look, this is what I would call sort of a standard volunteer journey, right? And your organization, if you manage volunteers at all, probably does a couple of these things, right? Acquisition, sign up, onboarding and training, mobilization, right? Actually getting them to show up and do the thing that they said they were going to do, right? Retention, recognition. And then finally, at the end of the day, how do we sort of tie those volunteer activities back to our programmatic activities and outputs in a way that allows us to say, we had 100 volunteer hours and we were able to deliver X amount of goods or services to our program participants, right? And so what I want to do is sort of walk through each of these and give you guys a little bit of a framework that I like to walk through with my customers to say, how are you thinking about these in every step, right? And there's really, really deep questions that you can ask yourself in each of these to really help sort of design what that end-to-end experience looks like for a volunteer. And then layering on top of that, when you start talking about something like bringing together data from disparate sources, perhaps in Salesforce and Nonprofit Cloud, how can we use that type of information to drive a personalized experience for every volunteer so that not every volunteer is going to go through the experience in the same way, but it feels personal and connected to them in a way that makes them feel like you understand them as a person, right? And I use this example all the time. I'm a busy dad of 3 young kids. You're going to approach me much differently from a volunteer perspective than maybe somebody who's retired and has time on their hands to volunteer, right? I need a different experience than that other person. So when we talk about acquisition, right, we're talking about recruiting and acquiring new volunteers, right? And we might do that through some targeted messaging, right? And so the questions that we should probably be asking ourselves is, how are we acquiring new volunteers, right? How are you measuring the efficacy of your acquisition strategies, right? Are you following up to see which emails or which activities generated the most interest from volunteers, right? And then on top of that, how do you even decide who to target with your acquisition campaigns? A lot of organizations want new and diverse sets of volunteers to expand their reach. But how do you decide who those people are, and how do you decide how to bring them into the fold, right? So assuming we've gotten somebody interested in volunteering, right? This is often where a lot of people drop out, right? The sign-up process, right? We want something that's simple. If they need to register for an account, making that simple and easy for them to sign up, find what they're looking for, right? And so we need to ask ourselves along the way, how much information do I actually need to ask from my volunteers and at what point in time? So we can do things with Salesforce that I like to call progressive profiling, right? Maybe all you need in the very beginning is my first name, last name, and email address, right? Maybe that's enough, right? Maybe you need my date of birth, or maybe you need some additional stuff, but really be conscious about how much information you're asking for, because the longer the form, the longer it takes somebody to fill out, you're going to get people dropping off. So then, asking yourself, well, when should they be required to create an account, right? I've been several of my customers, I went to their website and I tried to sign up to volunteer, right? And it was like asking me for my firstborn child just to sign up for a volunteer event. right? And that may be necessary, right, with things like working with kids or working with special populations of people, right? They may require some additional information. But I may just want to raise my hand right now to say, hey, I'm interested in volunteering, but as a busy dad of 3, I don't know when I can do that, right? And I need to be treated differently than you would for somebody who knows that they want to volunteer today, right? And then how do we provide volunteers with better information about the programs that they can sign up for, right? We have a plethora of volunteer opportunities. How do we target the right opportunities to the right people based on their preferences, their previous history, right? What we know about them as an individual. Once you sign them up, we got to train them, right? We got to onboard them, right? This is a big part of those 4 C's is providing clarity. What exactly are you asking me to do as a volunteer? Do I need to go through a background check? Do I need to provide additional information? Do I need to sign a waiver, right? All of those things should be brought to me as a volunteer as part of this experience, right? And so we need to think about for each of the different types of volunteer roles or positions, how do you sort of templatize those and templatize that onboarding so we can automate as much of that as possible, right? And then how are you going to keep track of that? And what are you going to do about it if you've asked me to do a background check and I haven't, right? How are you going to follow up with me? How are you going to nudge me? Once we've gone through all of that, right, then we need to get the volunteer to show up, right? Sometimes people sign up and they don't show up. So how do we best communicate pre-volunteer event details? Are we sending them an email? What if they don't check their email? What if they like text messages, right? Knowing those preferences and meeting people where they're at goes a long way in designing that end-to-end experience, right? And then once the event is over, how do you tell if they had a good time, right? How are you collecting feedback from these volunteers? Hey, did we do a good job? Did you like what you did? Did something happen that you want to tell us about? Do you want to send us a picture, right? How do we collect all of that? And where do we store that? And then ultimately, when we do collect that feedback, what do I need to do to be able to analyze those survey results? What am I going to do if somebody says, hey, I had a really terrible time volunteering with your organization? Where does that go? Who's responsible for following up with that, right? Sometimes just being acknowledged that you've raised an issue is enough, right? Hey, we saw you had a really, you didn't have the greatest experience at our volunteer. We want to be continuously improving. What can we do? What happened, right? Reaching out. Everybody likes to be thanked, right? If, at the very least, if somebody shows up and gives you their most precious resource, their time, right? We should be thanking them, right? And how are you going to do that? How do you know that they actually showed up? Are you checking them in at the volunteer event? Are you trusting that they just showed up, right? And so how are we giving those sort of post-event communications like thank yous and retention and recognition? Can we actually gamify the experience, right? It's crazy the things people do for badges or things that they can post on LinkedIn just to get, maybe at my 100th hour volunteering, right? How are you giving me sort of special recognition and gamifying that experience for me in a way that makes me want to come back for more, right? And then are you presenting those metrics to your volunteers in any meaningful way, right? Can they log in and track their own volunteer hours? Are you sending them a report at the end of the year, maybe with their annual donations, right? Hey, thank you for donating $1,000 to our organization this year, but also thank you for volunteering 100 hours, right? So those sorts of things go a really long way. And then finally, when we talk about impact, right? What are you tracking, right? What's important to your organization, to your volunteer coordinators, to your program managers? What do they need to see? And then what actions, would you take if you could achieve those, right? If we got an extra 1,000 hours of volunteering time a year, what would we do with that, right? And how would we use that to reinforce and inform our acquisition strategy, our sign-up strategy, right? So this is all sort of an endless feedback loop that we can use to improve our programs, right? And then ultimately, these volunteers are probably showing up to perform a service for a program, right? Or in service of a program, or maybe service of fundraising, right? How do we tie that volunteer activity, those hours, the days that they spend, how do we tie that back? What are we delivering to our program participants or the folks that benefit from our programs? And how do we tie those two together in a meaningful way that allows us to share the results back with our volunteers, but also inform our volunteer strategy overall, right? So this is sort of a framework that I like to work through. I like to ask these questions of my customers because it gets them thinking a little bit about how am I designing this sort of end-to-end experience? Am I even thinking about volunteering as an experience that somebody might go through with my organization? Or am I still sort of just thinking about how do I schedule shifts, right? How do I put them on a website, right? That's only half the battle. We need to really think about this as the 4 C's of volunteer engagement. And each C is really about bringing somebody closer to your mission and closer to your organization. All right, Rebekah, and I think I am going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for the overview. I think it's really important to note that Salesforce is the anchor to everything that we do here at Advanced Communities. We are solely a Salesforce partner. We're both a Salesforce implementation partner and an ISV partner, or as some like to say, a consultant and an app developer. And what that means is we solely implement Salesforce as a core solution, and we only build apps that are specific and dependent upon the Salesforce solution. So everything that you're going to see today when we discuss our product, MemberSmart, which is one of our flagship products, particularly for volunteer management, is built natively on the Salesforce platform, which means there's no third party, there are no APIs, there's no integration. This is all built directly on the Salesforce platform. If you'd like to skip to the next slide, please. Oh, it's me. Just kidding. All right, guys. So the next thing I want to do is walk through our Bookmark success story. Now, this is a success story that we partnered with, of course, with Salesforce as the core solution, and then Advanced Communities implemented a portal for Bookmark, who is a nonprofit organization that is a leading reading charity for primary school children in the United Kingdom. And their message is really for every child to have the same opportunity to discover the joy of reading and set them up for success. So Bookmark partners with schools to discover the joy of reading. They develop whole school reading cultures, and they provide one-to-one reading support. They're a volunteer-led reading program, and it involves 2 30-minute reading sessions a week for 6 weeks with a child who needs extra support for their readings. This is quite an involved process. So the project objectives were for Bookmark to establish a collaborative space where their volunteers could log in, their school leadership could log in, and manage children seeking assistance with their reading. And the platform would sort of serve as this centralized hub for program creation, so the volunteer opportunity creation, as well as the registration of that volunteer. But as Kevin was talking about earlier, there's also a need for things like volunteer onboarding, volunteer assignment, scheduling those reading sessions, managing those reading sessions, and then, of course, the centralization of all of that data so that you can track the progress of a child along with their volunteer. So the solution was actually for Advanced Communities to create a portal on Salesforce Experience Cloud for nonprofits, and that was a solution that we built from scratch. With a really strong focus too on the UI and UX. So we wanted the user experience to be very friendly to someone who might not be familiar with something like Salesforce. We wanted this to feel like a very comfortable experience for anyone at any level of volunteership. Remember, with these types of opportunities, and I'm sure as all the volunteer organizations that can attest on this webinar, you've got volunteers, everybody from the Kevin Solution Engineer of the Year for Salesforce with 3 kids to the, retired, grandparent who wants to go in and help at these schools. So you want the level of engagement to be quite simple within your portal. And so we really focus on the UX and UI aspect of the project. So our team really designed this sort of aesthetically pleasing interface and an integrated custom solution that enhanced sort of the out-of-the-box Salesforce functionality, which improved the look and feel of the site. It was also really important for our team to reduce the manual processes by implementing various automations, things like automated status updates of a volunteer, instant notifications, things like seamless synchronization with Salesforce. And consequently, all of that data is then automatically synchronized with the internal Salesforce environment. So whether that involves new schools, volunteers, or new users, or simply local data updates. So the benefits and results of this was that volunteers could seamlessly register to become a reader volunteer with Bookmark. They would have simplistic onboarding and program assignment. And we even implemented a custom self-registration form for volunteers to sign up based on their location preferences. So you can imagine if you've got a wide range of locations available within a reading charity, you need someone that is local to you. You don't want someone driving 2 or 3 hours to a volunteer opportunity when there's one 15 minutes down the road. So the solution that we built for them was able to actually filter by their region and show opportunities that were within a comfortable range for them to travel to these opportunities. We also implemented things like a prominent Book Now button for quick program access and registration. And then lastly, I really wanted to share sort of a bit of feedback about what Bookmark said about working with advanced communities and the solution we implemented for them. But rather than read it to you, I'm actually just going to paste it in the chat. So if you'd like to peruse the feedback that we received, we'd appreciate it. All right. So from here, that brings us into the MemberSmart solution. I'd like to walk you through sort of the components within MemberSmart, and then I'll hop over into a demonstration of the product itself. So MemberSmart is a comprehensive package for enhanced volunteer management and engagement. What does that mean? Well, historically, Advanced Communities has been an implementation partner to implement Salesforce. And over the years, we got really, really good at implementing Experience Cloud, which is the ability to log in and be authenticated within a portal. And as you can imagine, logging in can give you greater access within a community. So rather than viewing a community from a public point of view, once you're logged in, the organization knows who you are and says, well, now you can see things like volunteer opportunities, or you can log your volunteer hours. So by logging in, you have greater functionality within the portal. And over the years, we had customers coming to us and saying, we also need event management, for example. We also need a job board or a volunteer board. We also need the ability to post things like blogs or news articles. We'd like our volunteers to be able to engage with one another via a chatter group in Salesforce, which, if you're not familiar, functions a lot like a Facebook group, for example, where you can have admins and people can jump in and make posts or post images or post polls. And engage with the community, which really brings us back to Kevin's point. You can host all of the volunteer opportunities you want. You can host all of the events you want. But if you're not engaging in a way that makes the volunteer feel like they are truly a part of the organization, then there's some missing out there. And so our solution really focuses on the engagement of the organization with the volunteer, as well as promoting the opportunities for the volunteer to engage, such as events and groups and fundraising, etc. So from here, Kevin, can you confirm that you're seeing my demo org?
Sure am.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, guys. So this is a demo environment, which is called the Volunteer Portal. And this is something we put together strictly for this webinar purpose. There are other use cases along with the Bookmark UK use case. So if you'd like to see a real life example or maybe go and peruse the website, I'm sure in the follow-up email, we will send some examples for you to peruse through. But for all intents and purposes today, this is a fake organization, but we're going to walk through the different functionality that we've created just to show you off in this demo. So from here, I've actually logged into the volunteer portal as a volunteer. So I've been assigned as a volunteer within this organization, and I can come to the homepage and see the different things that this portal has to offer. So for example, straight from the homepage, we've enabled a donate button. We'll get to this a little later. We've also created this apply for a job button, which allows you to apply for a volunteer opportunity and other things you might be interested, like events or fundraising or partnerships. Maybe there's news and updates you're interested in. So the idea here is that this can mimic your website, any sort of look and feel, UX, UI that you've got within your current website, we can actually implement through Experience Cloud and allow you to have the same functionality, but within Salesforce. If we switch over into the events tab, I think Kevin made a really good point in one of our conversations leading up to this webinar, which was at the end of the day, volunteer management is nothing more than event management, essentially. When you really get to the anchor of it, an event could be something like a volunteer opportunity for someone to check people into a race for a race day or a beach cleanup day. At the end of the day, a volunteer opportunity is just a time and a place where a volunteer can go, register for that event, show up to the event, and then log their volunteer hours. So we have an events component within our volunteer portal here, which allows you to view the different events or volunteer opportunities that are upcoming and available. So we'll click on one here, but first let's look through the filters. So on the left, you can filter through event name, you can filter with a keyword of a description. You can also look at things like, is it a local or what we call in-person opportunity, or is this a webinar opportunity or an online opportunity? We also can filter between start date and end date. If you've got a range that you're interested in. And we have an integration with Google Maps, so it allows you to filter by location or distance range of that location. There are other filters that you can add here. These are just some examples. You can add to or take away from these. And then to hop into an opportunity, we've got an International Volunteer Day. So if we click into this event, it'll take us to the event landing page here. So from here, we'll have the banner image. And then we also have the description of the volunteer day. Now, this is a rich text field, so this is a quite simple agenda for the day or description for the day, but it can actually get quite complicated, and you can add in your own fonts or colors or images or hyperlinks, whatever you'd like. You'll notice here we also have buttons to add this event to your calendar, and it gives you the opportunity to register for the event. We also have tabs like Agenda. So we can hop in here and view the registration agenda items. So for example, if we open this up, we can see when registration is going to happen and exactly what you can expect. We can also click into more complicated agenda items. So for example, this one might be something where there are speakers involved. So in this case, it'll tell you when the session is happening and who the session speakers are and maybe their bios or images. Now, an interesting thing that happens after we register is that actually these plus signs show up on each agenda item. So we're actually able to click a plus sign to show our interest in attending those sessions. And then that all goes up into an agenda builder. So if we click into my schedule, those items that we have shown interest in then show up in our schedule, and we can save this to our phone, we can download it, we can print it, etc. We also have a speakers tab where you can post your speakers, their bios. You can show the sessions that they're engaging in, and you can also share social media handles, for example. Next up, we have a sponsors tab. Maybe this is something that's interesting to your organization if you'd like to share your sponsors. And then again, our location tab. And maybe you want to embed something like a video within your event landing page. So all of those are examples. We can also register for the event on the landing page. So from here, we have a number of different packages available. Now, the interesting thing here is that because we leverage Experience Cloud, you can actually show different packages to the individual that you want based on their member status. So maybe you have a brand new volunteer, and that volunteer is only allowed within your organization to volunteer for 4 or 5 different volunteer opportunities, to where there might be 100 volunteer opportunities within your organization. Maybe you need to be a certain level of volunteer, or you need to have gone through a certain amount of training in order to be eligible to volunteer for certain opportunities. So if that's the case, you can show a beginner volunteer or a more experienced volunteer the registration packages that are available to them based on who they are within the community. We've also shown things like, maybe there's an opportunity to join for free, or you can join with a paid package. So again, there's payment functionality attached to the different registration packages. Just to show you the payment process, I'll choose something with a donation option. Now, you'll notice here that when I go to register for an event, because I'm already authenticated within the community, my details pre-populate within the event registration page. So I don't need to enter my own information. Maybe, however, I want to bring a friend. So if that's the case, I can also add someone else to this registration. So I'm going to pick on Kevin a little bit here and add him. And from here, I can go to the next portion. And at this point, we're going to be able to enter our payment information. So I think it's a really important thing to note that we have a couple of different payment processors that we support. The first is Stripe, a very common payment processor, particularly in the US. We also use a payment aggregator called Spreedly, which opens the door to about 120 different payment gateways. So if you are using a payment processor other than Stripe, it might be interesting to search, if you simply Google search the payment processor names such as WorldPay and Spreedly, you can see if it falls under the Spreedly umbrella, and that is Spreedly. For those of you that are interested, and we can also help you out with that information if you'd like to email us after the webinar. So from here, because I chose a donation amount, I will enter a donation, and then I will pop in my credit card details. Currently, the processor that we're using is Stripe. So at this time, our Stripe engine is taking that donation. And at the end on screen, we will get a success message, and then it will allow us to either add that event to our calendar or download the ICS file for other calendars like Outlook, and then we can complete it here. So that is sort of a standard event registration process. We also have an interesting feature within advanced communities that is particularly interesting for volunteer organizations. So for example, Greenpeace is a customer of advanced communities, and as you can imagine, volunteer management is something incredibly important to Greenpeace. They also have regional chapter leaders of different Greenpeace volunteer groups. So if you think about maybe a volunteer manager needing to create events for their regional group, you can actually assign permission set for an individual to create their own events on the front end of Salesforce without having access to the back office CRM. So without seeing the data that you don't want individuals to see other than employees of your organization, you can actually assign permission for a power user within the community or one of those volunteer managers, for example, to create their own events on the front end of Salesforce. And by doing that, we can actually use an event wizard. I won't walk you through this whole process. We don't have time today, but just so you know, there is a click-based wizard that we give you access to where you can give those power users the ability to create events on the front end of Salesforce. And it's just as simple as choosing things like items from a drop-down field, for example. So if you'd like to see more of this, we are very happy to schedule a demo with you and show you that functionality. From here, I would like to walk you through a couple more things here. So let me hop into our volunteer opportunities. Here we go. All right, so what you're seeing here, it says jobs, but this is actually a component that we have called job board. And our volunteer organizations tend to use this for a volunteer opportunity job board. So if the word jobs is not appealing to you, you can use something like volunteer opportunities. It's very easy to change within the community. So if we were interested in applying for a position, we can click into a position and read the description. This is a very long description of this opportunity, but we can go ahead and apply. So if you click this button here, my information will pre-populate because I am already authenticated within the community. I can add information like a cover letter or a message to the organization. And then from here, I can also upload files. So for example, we've given you the opportunity to add a CV, but other volunteer organizations are interested in adding things like certification forms or background check forms. So you can add those here. Just let them know which form you need. And from here, it's as simple as that. Your application was saved. And as an individual who has applied for a volunteer position, I can actually go into Salesforce or into the portal here and check on the status of my volunteer application. Another thing that's really important for volunteers is to be able to report their hours. So we've actually built an engine that allows you to report the number of hours that you have volunteered with an organization. So within the portal, I can go to report hours and I can choose the job for which I'm reporting. I can choose my volunteer shift, and then I can put my hours worked. Maybe I need to add a comment like I worked overtime 2 hours, 3 hours, and then we can submit that. And this keeps track of the number of hours for you within the portal. And so then from here, you can go into My Volunteering and see the number of hours that you have contributed and maybe how do you rank within the program. And again, like Kevin was saying earlier, there's opportunity within the portal to do things like gamification. So maybe you tie awards to how you rank within the volunteer portal. If you're in the top 5% of volunteers, maybe there's something special for you where you get to attend a gala at the end of the year, or maybe you get a special volunteer package with a t-shirt or a hat or something interesting. So lots of opportunity here. Next up, it might be interesting to communicate with other volunteers in your area. And so the way that we manage this is through a volunteer board that allows you to see the members within this community. So perhaps you put some filtration here. Maybe every volunteer can't see every volunteer. Maybe they can only see the volunteers that are within their region. So you can do that by assigning permission within the portal for certain members to see their regional members based on their status within the community. So from here, you can reach out to someone via email. You can send them a chatter message within the portal. And you can also just see other people that are interested in the same types of volunteer opportunities that you would be interested in. So this is a way of collaborating within the community. And the last thing I want to show you is, I'm sorry, 2 more things I want to show you. The first is groups. So this is the functionality I was talking about with Chatter. This behaves a lot like a Facebook group. So what you can do is jump into the Community Changemakers group, for example, see a description of the group, any information you want to share, and you can manage the members. So perhaps this is an opportunity for that power user, again, to be a manager of a group and be able to manage the posts, the polls, the questions, the announcements within a user group and really spearhead the engagement. Lastly, I want to show you something that is actually an add-on to our MemberSmart product. So this doesn't come out of the box, but it is something that you can bolt onto your package, and it is our fundraising campaign capability. So this allows you to run campaigns that look and feel a lot like GoFundMe, except we don't take your money at the end if you don't meet your goal. And so from here, you can see the fundraising campaign. You can see a description of that campaign, and you can choose to donate or maybe even share this via social media. You can also see different comments. Maybe your donors want to make a comment and wish you luck with your campaign. And you can also choose, I like to add, if you are a donor, you can choose to donate anonymously. So from here, the donation functionality is as simple as clicking donate. And from here, it will open up a form that allows us to choose something like a pre-selected amount that you'd like to donate. You could also make this a single or a recurring donation, or if the value that you'd like to donate does not show up in one of these pre-selected buttons, you can actually choose a different amount. And from here, because we are logged into this community, we can choose a card that has been tokenized or saved on file for us to use as the payment method here. And from here, we can go ahead and donate. On the back end, this transaction records in Salesforce as a donation on the volunteer's contact record. It also allows for a donation receipt to be sent. You can see this on screen. You can also get this via email. And you can do things like add a comment to increase your impact, or you can share with your social network by copying the link. So from here, I'd like to pop back into our slide deck here and really just open up the room for some questions. I'll be honest, I have not been looking at the chat while I've been presenting, so I'm going to go ahead and take a peek at the chat now to see if there's any questions here. Kevin, anything you would like to add post-demo?
No, I was going to bring up a couple of questions that seem to be popular in the chat, so you don't have to. I was keeping track of it while you were talking. A few folks had asked about volunteer profiles, and I'm wondering from the group if that's a volunteer setting up their own profile or the profile of the volunteer sort of from an internal manager's view, like a volunteer manager's view. Both. Okay. So I can take, I'll take the internal one if that's okay, and typically how we would see that set up. And then Rebekah, if you want to talk maybe a little bit about how a volunteer might set up their own profile and preferences in Experience Cloud, we can do that.
Yeah.
So internally, typically we would see a volunteer set up as either a contact in your org or a person account, depending on what your org is sort of using, and then the preferences would either be stored on that record itself, and then or sort of some child object of that record that would store preferences for a volunteer. And then most of the time I would see them labeled as a volunteer either with a checkbox or like a record type or something in Salesforce that would indicate they're a volunteer, they're a donor. I like to use the term supporter because it covers sort of both use cases, but sort of to distinguish that. And then really from a function of their activity within your organization, you can determine, are they a volunteer? Are they a donor? What is their sort of preferences, where they're located? What do they like to do? Typically, we see all that stored with the person themselves in Salesforce.
Yeah, absolutely. And then from the front end perspective, how does that translate into the portal? So a volunteer, or as you say, a supporter, can actually manage their own profile within the community. And I think the interesting thing to say is that there is sort of a relationship between the back end, like Kevin was talking about, and the front end of the portal. So for example, an organization might only want someone to display their first name, last name, and email address. If that's the case, then no matter what the supporter does, they can only show their first name, last name, and email address on the front end of the portal, which really translates into that sort of member directory component that we were looking at. So being able to see other people's information. However, if the organization wants to essentially open the floor for that supporter to show their first name, last name, email address, phone number, region, etc., then one thing that the organization can do is turn on the ability for that supporter to show the information that they want to show. So while some people might be comfortable with showing all of those things, some people might be more comfortable only showing things like first name, last name, email address. And so all of that is actually self-service capability within the portal once you're logged in. Do you think that answers the question, Kevin?
I think so. And if not, the folks can let us know in the chat. We did have a question. Are the advanced communities components available in French? And in particular, is it available? How does it? How do I phrase this? What's the accessibility like for folks maybe accessing portals with that are either sight impaired or need a screen reader or something like that?
Yeah, two very different questions, but both very important. The first is there are many different ways of handling translation. So I would really suggest having a conversation with advanced communities. So I can see this is an anonymous question, but if you are interested in chatting with AC, we would be very happy to show you the different ways that we've managed translation within different portals. We do have French customers, for example, and there is translation. Typically, though, the reason people ask this question is because they want to manage their translation differently than having it auto-translate, for example, via Google Translate. And if that is the question, then the answer is yes, that is available to you, and we are able to enable you to put in your own translation of the events or different components within Salesforce. So I would highly suggest that you reach out and allow us to sort of show you that functionality and examples of customers who have done it. And then from the other side, I'm assuming we're talking about things like WCAG accessibility. And yes, we are WCAG compliant. And we actually have a number of customers, including Guide Dogs UK, for example, where there are accessibility needs, and we're able to accommodate those. So again, another great opportunity to reach out to AC and schedule just some time with me or other members of my team on the technical side that can show you that functionality.
Yeah. And then we had one here. Can we upload data, existing data easily? Yes, is the short answer. There are many different ways to get data into Salesforce, and I would say that's probably generally more a Salesforce question than an advanced communities question. And specifically, a lot depends on the structure of the data, where it is currently. Is it all over the place? Is it on sticky notes? Is it in Excel? All of that, determines the level of effort to import existing data, but there are many tools to do that at its simplest form, just a CSV upload of existing data to the right places in Salesforce.
Exactly. Do we have any other questions? One more question. Are volunteers considered contacts or persons? This sounds like a Kevin question.
So there's in Salesforce, typically we'll represent people in one of two ways. It is a contact or what we call a person account. Those are really the only two ways to represent what I'll use the broad term individual in Salesforce. And so depending on if your organization utilizes person accounts, they would be a person account. Or if they are, if you're utilizing the standard sort of account contact model, they would be contacts.
Does AC MemberSmart work with volunteers for Salesforce? Another Kevin question.
Sure. I actually, Rebekah laughs because I said we're definitely going to get a question about this. Yeah. It comes up a lot. Yes, is the short answer. It works with Volunteers for Salesforce. Volunteers for Salesforce, for those who aren't familiar, was a managed package developed many years ago, probably almost 10 now, and is used by a large number of organizations to do what I call volunteer management, schedule shifts, schedule recurring shifts, find volunteers. What it didn't receive a lot of is updates in sort of the end user experience, either through a volunteer portal or on your website or something like that. There's not been many updates in that in many years. So what AC can do, or advanced communities can do, is sort of extend that functionality beyond and really provide sort of a nice event style management system on top of Volunteers for Salesforce. So you can still keep things like the shifts and the volunteer information in V4S if you'd like, and then really extend that that functionality out to folks in a portal-like experience. And honestly, just a much nicer way than I think B4S is going to be able to do.
Excellent. I don't see any more questions in the chat. Maybe we'll give it one more minute and just see. And if anybody has any questions, go ahead and type those into the chat for us. Oh, wait. Sorry, I was looking at, there's also another open chat.
We have one, do Salesforce and advanced communities offer discounts to nonprofits? I'll take it from the Salesforce side, yes. Every nonprofit that meets the eligibility guidelines, and those are on our website, gets 10 free Enterprise Edition licenses, and then heavy discounts on additional licenses should you need more than 10. And that's a commitment we've kept up with for 20 plus years now. And so most everything that you see on the Salesforce website is typically in the neighborhood of like a 70-ish% discount off commercial pricing.
Yes, and I always tell customers, don't be afraid to reach out to Salesforce in that regard too, because I think a lot of people think Salesforce and think maybe it's not accessible to their volunteer organization or to their nonprofit. And the answer is a lot of times people are surprised. So don't be concerned about reaching out to Salesforce and asking about that. Additionally, Advanced Communities follows suit with Salesforce, and we offer a heavy discount to nonprofits as well on all of our products and services. So we actually have a nonprofit rate for all of our services customers. So anybody who is interested in being implemented on Salesforce, and we also discount our license costs for all nonprofits that meet the Salesforce guidelines for nonprofits. Which is typically 401c3 volunteer or nonprofit organizations. And yeah, we're happy to share that pricing with you. Cool. I don't see any other questions. All right, guys. I think that wraps it up for the day. Thank you for staying even just a few minutes over for the Q&A. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. And again, feel free to reach out to either one of us. Our contact information is on screen. All you have to do is grab that QR code right there, and you can schedule some time to meet with us. Thanks for the kind message, Pravi. It's nice to hear from you. Thanks for being here. We look forward to hearing from all of you very soon.